My name is Natalie. I'm 21 years old, a senior majoring in political science at a public university on the East Coast. There's nothing particularly special about me. I'm not the valedictorian, not the campus beauty queen, and certainly not the kind of daughter people proudly bring up at family dinners. I'm just the one who knows how to take care of herself. The one who doesn't need reminding to survive. The one who's always working odd jobs, eating instant noodles, and skipping weekend gatherings because she has a night shift to cover. So, no one really noticed when I quietly sat at the end of the Thanksgiving table that year with a modest plate of food, a glass of water, and a polite enough smile to avoid being labeled unfriendly. The chatter, the clinking glasses, the loud laughter from my mother's side of the family, all of it blurred into the background. My mind was on an unfinished essay, the shift I'd picked up after the holidays, and next semester's tuition I still had no idea how to pay for. I was thinking of asking for extra hours at the bookstore near my dorm. What I was thinking about that Thanksgiving wasn't gratitude, or wishes, or celebration. It was the amount left in my bank account, $87.23. And then, just as everyone was helping themselves to slices of pumpkin pie, my grandmother suddenly stood up, raised her glass, her voice brimming with emotion. "I'm truly glad to see Natalie making good use of the college fund your grandfather and I set up for you when you were born. That's what makes me proudest today." I froze, as if someone had wrapped a hand around my throat. "What fund?" I asked, my voice so soft I wasn't even sure I'd spoken aloud. But apparently, it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Because at that exact moment, my father coughed an awkward, dry burst, like he had just choked on a chicken bone. My mother went pale, her hand, mid-slice through the pie, began to tremble slightly as the silver knife stopped in midair. No one answered, no one explained. No one laughed it off to lighten the air. The laughter that filled the room a moment earlier vanished into silence. No one took another bite, no one dared say a word. My grandmother stood there, confused, scanning the room, then turned to me. "You didn't know?" she asked. And for the first time in a long while, I looked her straight in the eyes and said, slowly, "Number I didn't." No one responded. But no one denied it either. I looked at my father, he turned his face away. Looked at my mother, she stared into her glass of wine. My younger brother, the one who had dropped out and been gifted a car by my parents, kept tapping away at his phone, as if none of this concerned him. And in that moment, beneath the warm lights, surrounded by the people who once called themselves family, I understood. Something big, something important, had been hidden from me for years. And now, the mask had finally fallen. All the moments that had once felt off came rushing back in waves. I used to believe I was strong. Not because someone taught me how to be, but because I had no choice. Since my freshman year of college, I had learned to survive on my own. I didn't complain, didn't expect much. I quietly looked for jobs after class, starting with handing out flyers, bussing tables, tutoring neighborhood kids, then moved on to being a part-time librarian, a weekend cashier at the supermarket. Anything that helped me pay tuition on time, I did it, without complaint. While my friends posted vacation photos, weekend hangouts, and Instagram check-ins, I curled up in bed, eating instant noodles, calculating whether I had enough to cover rent and textbooks for the month. There were nights when I was so exhausted, I'd fall asleep at my desk, dreaming only of graduating on time. Not because I was chasing glory or success, simply because I couldn't afford another semester. And I had always believed my parents didn't have the money. That we were simply getting through hard times together. That if I just pushed a little harder, they'd be proud of me. I believed that until the day I saw my younger brother being handed the keys to a brand new car right after finishing high school. No college plans. No direction. But he had a car, his own room, and spending money. I sat quietly in the corner of the living room that day, forcing a smile when my mom said, "Your brother needs motivation to figure things out, but you already know what you want." I didn't respond, because I knew that if I opened my mouth, I'd cry. That sentence might have sounded like a compliment. But I understood it clearly. It was a way of justifying their favoritism. A clever excuse for sacrificing me to invest in the child they believed needed it more. Since I was little, I was always the one who caused the least trouble. I didn't skip class, I didn't talk back, I didn't do anything to disappoint them. But that also made me invisible. I didn't have the right to be tired, I didn't have the right to be wrong. There was no room for me to be weak. Whenever I said I was exhausted, my mom would respond, "Don't say that. You're my pride." Whenever I asked to quit a job because my schedule was overwhelming, my dad would say, "Just hang in there a bit longer. Things will get better." No one asked if I was okay. They only praised me for being strong, as if that praise alone was reason enough for me to keep enduring. My brother was the opposite. He was once suspended for cheating on a final exam, but instead of punishment, my parents hired a private tutor for him. He caused a minor accident while driving, and my mom simply said, "It's okay. I'm just glad you're not hurt." But when I asked for $200 to buy textbooks for my major, she questioned whether I really needed them and said, "Back when I was in school, we didn't have books that thick." After that, I stopped asking. I cut every corner I could. Lunches made of plain sandwiches, hand-me-down coats, and borrowing textbooks from the library instead of buying new ones. And I didn't tell anyone about it because I thought I should be grateful I even got to go to college. What I didn't realize was that I'd been living in a fictional story. A beautiful dream I made up to make sense of my pain. The scarcity I endured wasn't inevitable, it was the result of a choice. A choice made by the very people I trusted the most. My parents. They chose to spend the money that should have gone to me on things I never received. And all those times I budgeted every penny. All those nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. Because my days were too full, all the moments I swallowed my tears and called it growing up, they were all the consequence of a betrayal I never saw coming. My memories are no longer snapshots of effort and resilience, they're evidence of being systematically overlooked. They saw me, but didn't truly see me. They loved me, but with a love that had conditions, limitations, and calculations attached. I can no longer keep playing the role of the good daughter. I can't keep carrying the weight of injustice under the label of independence. And maybe I was never truly strong. Maybe I was just a child forced to be tough so that others could feel better about their favoritism. But now things are different. Now I know. And for the first time in my life, I allow myself to be angry. Not because I'm weak, but because I've been strong in silence for far too long. That night, I left the dinner early, telling my grandmother I was feeling tired. She hugged me gently, just like always, saying nothing more, but I could clearly see the confusion in her eyes as she watched me walk away. I drove back to my apartment. It was only a 10-minute ride, but it felt like a lifetime. In my head, her words kept echoing. "I'm truly glad to see you making good use of the college fund your grandfather and I set up for you." I'd assumed it was a mistake. I tried to come up with every reasonable explanation. Maybe she confused it with my scholarship, maybe the fund had never actually been activated. But the more I tried to reason it out, the deeper something inside me began to fracture. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was doubt, a kind I had never allowed myself to feel when it came to my parents. As soon as I stepped inside, I didn't change clothes, didn't wash off my makeup, didn't turn on the lights. I sat down on the floor, my back leaning against the edge of my single bed, opened my laptop, and logged into the bank account I'd been using since I was 16, the one my mom had helped me open to manage my part-time income. I remembered it clearly. My parents always told me they had no extra money to save for me, so if I wanted to go to college, I had to become independent. I had never doubted that. But that night, I typed in the account number and password with trembling hands. And then, I saw it. A hidden sub-account I had never noticed in all these years. An account in my name, registered as an education purpose savings fund. Current balance, $0. But when I opened the transaction history, my heart stopped. The account was created when I was just 2 years old, opened by my grandparents. The initial deposit was $10,000. Each year, more money was added until by the time I was 14, the total value of the fund had reached $59,800. $870.21. But starting at age 15, right before I would have had an ID and been able to monitor it myself, the money began to be withdrawn. In chunks of several $1,000s at a time. Each withdrawal was labeled family support. The final transaction occurred 3 months before I entered college when the remaining balance was completely wiped out. I don't know how long I sat there in silence. I opened a Google Doc and created a table to list every transaction. Then I took screenshots of every withdrawal and saved them. I tried to keep my mind clear, but inside, I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash everything. I wanted to run to my parents and shout, "Why? Why did you let me work myself to the bone every night, eat dry ramen because I didn't have time to boil water, sleep curled up on library chairs while that money, the money that could have helped me live like a normal student, was completely drained?" And by whom? I wasn't even legally allowed to withdraw it as a minor. And I'd never even known that account existed. I called the bank the very next morning pretending to be a student checking on an education account opened by a guardian. After a few security questions, the bank employee confirmed. The legal representative registered on the account was my father. Every withdrawal had been made by him, or authorized by him for my mother to sign in his place. The bank even had the paperwork on file, complete with matching signatures. In that moment, I didn't feel hurt anymore. I felt cold, bone-deep cold. I sat at the print shop near campus, watching page after page come out of the little printer. One sheet, then two, then three, until they stacked into a thick packet of paper. On it were exact dates, exact amounts, exact names of those who made the withdrawals. No longer suspicion, now it was proof. No longer, maybe they didn't know, now it was undeniable truth. My parents knew about the fund, and they had intentionally taken it without telling me. No notice. No explanation, no apology. And no, they hadn't used it for me, but to pay off debts, repair the roof, and buy a brand new car for my brother. The one who didn't go to college, the one who had never worked a day in his life. I felt like someone had been digging a hole beneath my feet for years, and today, I fell through. All those phrases like, "Be strong, you're independent, just push a little more," now sounded like mockery, like a cruel joke. I didn't know what made me angrier, the fact that the money was taken, or the fact that they never thought I had a right to know. They took my future and called it a sacrifice for the family. But I never agreed to sacrifice, I never gave my consent, and I will not stay silent any longer. Because there's one thing I now understand more clearly than ever. Betrayal doesn't need to shout to hurt you sometimes, it arrives through silence, through a nod disguised as love. Through the years, someone lets you believe you are strong enough to manage on your own, but never worthy of being protected. And that, more than anything, is what I cannot forgive. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind couldn't stop circling one question. If they could do this behind my back when I was just a child, how many other things have I not been told? I sat on the floor, surrounded by a pile of printed documents, bank statements, account opening papers, transaction logs. Every number felt like a paper cut not enough to bleed, but deep enough to ache to the bone. I knew I had to do something. For the first time in my life, I didn't care about protecting the family's reputation or keeping the peace. I wanted the truth to be called by its name. I wanted the law to speak for me because if I stayed silent, who would stop them from doing this to someone else? The next morning, I booked an appointment with the university's free legal aid clinic. My advisor was a young attorney named Miller Sharp Eyes, a calm voice, but firm enough to make me feel safe sitting across from him. I handed over everything, no omissions. I made it clear, I wasn't looking for a family meeting or reconciliation. I needed to know, was this illegal? He read each page carefully, occasionally nodding or marking something. When he finished, he looked up and asked a question that made my spine go cold. How old were you when these transactions started? I answered, from 15 to 18. He gave a slow nod. Then Natalie, under state law, Any trust account or education fund in a minor's name can only be used for its intended purpose unless there's a court order or written consent from the account holder upon turning legal age. In your case, if there's no signed authorization from you, those withdrawals may constitute misappropriation of a minor's assets. I didn't respond. My throat felt dry, but inside me, a quiet fire began to burn. Not from rage anymore, but because, finally, someone had named my pain. Not responsibility, not sacrifice, but a crime. Attorney Miller walked me through the steps to start a formal complaint. He helped me list the required documents, draft a statement, and prepare to contact the district attorney's office if needed. But before taking any official steps, he advised me to give my family a chance to respond formally. "You're not required to," he said. "But if these are people you once loved, you may need to hear what they say when they can no longer deny the truth." I stayed silent. Inside me, affection and betrayal were tearing each other apart. But eventually, I nodded. I needed to hear them say it, or at least, I wanted them to know their lies had nowhere left to hide. That evening, I sat in front of my screen, hands resting on the keyboard. The email I wrote was brief. Not a single word wasted. "I know everything. I have all the proof. Bank confirmations, transaction records, and the original documents from Grandma and Grandpa. Please don't try to soften this. I'm no longer the child you can steer with vague explanations. If there's anything you wish to say, now is the time to say it clearly. I'll wait until Friday. After that, everything will be submitted to the university's legal office and the appropriate authorities." I read the email one last time, then hit send. And then, I just sat there. I didn't cry, I didn't tremble. There was only silence filling the room, but not the kind I'd known before. This wasn't loneliness. This was the quiet before the storm. I expected they might call, or write back, or pretend not to have seen it. But no. 3 hours later, just before 11 p.m., there was a knock at my apartment door. 4 knocks, short and firm. Not a friend. Not dorm staff. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was my parents. Standing close together, faces stiff. My father wore a thick coat, holding his hat. My mother had no makeup on for the first time. I saw her real face. Uncovered. Unprepared. Her eyes panicked, laced with something that looked like fear. I didn't open the door. I just stood there so they would know that this time, I was no longer the daughter who opened the door just because it was family knocking. If they wanted to say something, they would have to start with the truth. And the truth hurts. I didn't reply to my mother's email. Didn't answer when my father called. Didn't open the door when they came to knock 2 more times after that. But I still agreed to attend the Christmas dinner, not to forgive, not to reconcile, but to end it. Clearly. Finally. Without leaving room for confusion or false hope. I knew if I simply disappeared, they would rewrite the story, say I suddenly rebelled, that I changed after college, that I was too sensitive under pressure. I wouldn't let them. Not this time. This time, I would be the one holding the microphone. The party was held at Grandma's house, the big old home where we used to gather every holiday as kids. The living room was just the same, warm fireplace, a Christmas tree nearly touching the ceiling, twinkling lights, and classic holiday music playing softly from a speaker in the corner. Relatives began arriving around 5 p.m., arms full of gifts, faces full of laughter, none of them aware of what had unfolded over the past month. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m. Wearing a heavy coat, my hair tied back, no makeup, no smile. In my bag was a white envelope. Inside were full copies of the bank statements, the trust documents, and a letter with an official seal from the university legal advisor. Everything printed cleanly. No highlights. No annotations. Just the truth, bare and complete. I stepped inside, unnoticed at first. Heads only turned when my grandmother exclaimed, "Natalie, you made it." I smiled faintly, not out of joy, but out of courtesy. My mother walked out from the kitchen, her face going rigid when she saw me. My father stood behind her, gripping his wine glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. My brother sat on the sofa, scrolling on his phone, not even bothering to look up. No one greeted me. No one asked how I'd been these past few weeks. Not a single person. I didn't eat. Didn't accept any gifts. When everyone began gathering around the table, preparing to begin dinner, I stood up and pulled the envelope from my bag. My voice was steady, loud enough for all to hear. Before we all say Merry Christmas, I have something to say. It won't take long. The room froze. My parents didn't move. My younger cousin stared at me, uneasy. My grandmother tilted her head, confused. I continued. Everyone here knows I've been in college on a scholarship, working part-time, living frugally. What no one knows is that I once had a tuition fund worth nearly $60,000, set up by Grandma and Grandpa when I was a child. But that fund was emptied before I ever touched it. And the ones who emptied it were my parents. The entire room went silent. I opened the envelope, pulled out the documents, and placed them on the table. These are the bank records, each transaction, every date, every signature. This is a confirmation letter from my legal advisor. And this is the original trust agreement, signed by Grandma and Grandpa. I looked around, no one moved. They weren't poor, they weren't desperate, they were greedy. And they chose to take what was meant for me to fix the house, buy a car for my brother, and live as if I never existed. My grandmother burst into tears, the kind that fell too fast to wipe away. "Oh my God, sweetheart, I didn't know." She sobbed, eyes pleading with mine. I nodded gently. I knew she wasn't involved. My little cousin, the one always bragging about her academic achievements, sat speechless, her lips trembling as if to speak, but no words came. My brother, the one everyone said just needed a little help, didn't lift his head. Didn't say sorry. Just stared at the floor, his phone slipping from his hand without him even noticing. I turned to my parents and said only one sentence. "I hope you don't plan on teaching my brother that betrayal is something you can hide forever." My mother tried to step forward, her voice trembling. "Natalie, please, listen to me." But I stepped back. No need, everyone's heard enough. I left the stack of documents on the table and walked away. I didn't take my coat, didn't carry anything with me. Except for the one thing I held onto the entire evening: silence. A silence that didn't come from weakness but from the fact that, for the first time, I had nothing left to prove. They had destroyed their own image. I merely let the light in. I stepped out the front door as snow began to fall, tiny flakes landing on my hair, melting as quickly as the last illusions I'd been holding onto. Behind me, the house still glowed with warm light, laughter still echoed within, but, for me, that Christmas would be the last time I'd enter that house as a daughter. And the first time I'd walk away as a free person. I didn't look back as I left that house. I didn't need to. I didn't want to. There was nothing left to see. The people behind me, they might have been my parents, my siblings, my family, on paper. But in terms of emotion, trust, and morality, they were strangers. Strangers who once had the power to break me. And they used it, over and over again, without hesitation. I walked into the freezing December night, the snow covering each step like a clean white sheet being drawn over something long dead. Not love, but illusion. The illusion that if I were good enough, kind enough, quiet enough, I would be loved. I arrived back at my apartment close to midnight. When I walked in, I didn't feel empty. I felt light. Strangely light. As if I had finally let go of a boulder that had been crushing my chest for years. I made myself a cup of hot tea, opened my laptop, and saw a new email from the university's legal office. Subject line: "Your complaint has been officially received. State Department of Justice confirms eligibility for preliminary investigation." I opened the message and read every word. Still the same dry legal language, but to me, it carried a different weight. It was validation. A message that said, "This happened, your pain has grounds, and you're not crazy." I've never been the type to seek out lawsuits. I used to believe in protecting my parents' dignity, afraid that if I spoke up others would look at my family with pity. But then I realized, The dignity I'd been protecting all these years was nothing more than a mask hiding greed and manipulation. I no longer wished to stay silent just to preserve the respect of people who had never truly respected me. Because if justice is the only thing I have left, then at least I will not leave my past as a victim. A week later, my parents received their summons. Attorney Miller was now my legal representative. He had submitted all the evidence on my behalf to the proper authorities. The bank records, the confirmation letters, the full written statement. When I signed the final complaint form, my hand didn't shake. I felt no guilt. Only calm, like everything was finally shifting back into place, even if it came through pain. That night, I received a message from my mother. Not an apology, but a message that read like it was written from wounded pride and simmering anger. You didn't have to go this far, we're family. How could you be so heartless? I read it over and over, searching for any words that said, I'm sorry, I was wrong, or, I understand how much you've been hurt. There were none. Only accusations for not staying silent. I didn't respond. I simply reached out and blocked her number. Just like I had once blocked out guilt that didn't belong to me. 2 days later, my father called. This time from an unknown number. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail. This is all just a misunderstanding. You know that. We just need to talk. You know, back then we weren't doing well financially. Everyone had to sacrifice a little. I almost laughed. They called the theft of my education fund a little sacrifice. Called 7 years of struggling, juggling 2 jobs while a full tuition sat unused. A misunderstanding. Number. This wasn't about family anymore. This was a violation, a betrayal. A real offense, one that couldn't be erased with a phone call or a few carefully chosen lines. Attorney Miller sent me an email confirming the date of the preliminary hearing. I wasn't required to attend, but I would. Not to confront them, but to look them in the eye as the justice system read their names off the case file. To let them know that Natalie, the daughter who was independent, was now strong enough to hold them accountable. I had spent my entire youth trying to be the good child, the model sister, the excellent student, and, in return, all I received was cold silence and empty glances. Not anymore. I wrote a letter by hand to my grandmother, the only person I believed truly didn't know. In the letter, I told her I didn't blame her. I knew she had trusted the wrong people. But I needed distance, to heal. I included a photo of myself, standing outside the university library, holding my graduation gown, eyes looking toward the future. No applause, no celebration. Just proof that I survived without selling my soul for the title of good daughter. When you speak the truth, you don't always get recognition. More often, you receive silence or resentment. But what matters is you've stepped out of the cage of silence they tried to build around you. And for me, that alone was the strongest act of resistance. No screaming, no begging for apologies, because once trust dies, it cannot be revived with tears. I graduated on a mild, sunny day in early May. The sky wasn't too clear, nor too gray, much like how I felt as I stood on campus, wearing a deep blue gown, holding a crimson diploma stamped with "Graduated with honors, political science." Around me, classmates cheered, their families crowding under blooming cherry blossoms for photos. I stood alone. No flowers, no congratulatory signs, no family arms embracing me on the school lawn. But I wasn't sad. Because I knew if their presence was only ever a mask for everything they took from me, then their absence today was the first form of honesty I'd ever known. I sent the graduation photo to my grandmother after the ceremony. No message attached. I didn't expect a reply, but a week later, I received a letter from her. The envelope was old, the handwriting shaky but still legible. Dearest Natalie, I'm sorry I trusted the wrong people. I truly didn't know the fund would become the reason you were hurt. I'm proud of you for doing what no one else in this family dared to do. Breaking the cycle and holding on to your integrity. This is a small gift, not to compensate, but to let you know, at least one person in this family still believes in you. Tucked inside was a personal check for $5,000, not a fortune. But to me, it carried the weight of something far greater. Acknowledgement. For the first time in this long, painful journey, someone said, "I'm sorry," without a single excuse. A few weeks later, I moved to Boston, where I had been offered a position at a policy tech startup as a social data analyst. It wasn't my dream job, but it was the first place where I was valued for my abilities, not for my family's name or any connections. My new apartment was on the 5th floor of an old, quiet building. There was no elevator, so every day I climbed nearly 100 steps, a sweet punishment for the freedom I had finally reclaimed. The apartment was just about 40 square meters, a small living room, a corner kitchen, a bedroom with a window overlooking the park. But everything inside, it was mine. The chair I chose. The painting I hung. The books I arranged the way I wanted. For the first time, I didn't have to ask anyone for permission to live the way I wanted. In the mornings, I woke up early, brewed coffee, opened the window to let the sunlight in. At night, I turned on the warm lights, played old jazz records, and wrote journal entries about my first days at the office. No one checked what time I got home. No one asked how I spent my money. No one mocked me for buying a bouquet of flowers to place on the table. I realized I didn't need laughter around a dinner table to feel worthy. I didn't need to be called the pride of the family to feel like I deserved to be here. I was worthy simply because I was me, because I had walked through the wreckage of a broken emotional system and still held onto my humanity. One Sunday, while reorganizing my books, I stumbled across an old folder: bank statements, complaint forms, letters from the lawyer. I didn't cry when I saw them. But I didn't smile either. It just felt like someone lightly tapped my shoulder and whispered, "Look how far you've come." I carefully stacked everything back into the box and labeled it. Not to hold a grudge, but to remember I survived. I didn't reach out to my parents. I didn't need to know whether they had been sentenced or just warned. That was no longer my focus. Because I had learned something important. Sometimes, justice doesn't come in the form of a ruling, it comes in the form of release. It's the ability to live well without dragging along the faces of those who once made it hard to breathe. It's being able to walk into a bakery and buy yourself your first birthday cake without feeling alone. It's no longer dreading the holidays because no one has the power to ruin them anymore. I have a colleague at work, Sophia, who was the first person to say something that made me cry. That day, I walked into the office soaking wet from the rain, having forgotten my umbrella. She laughed, handed me a towel, and said, "Come in. Everyone has a place here, no one gets left behind." I didn't say anything, but in my heart, I thought, this is the family I choose. Everyone has the right to rewrite what the word family means. For me, it's no longer the people who gave birth to me or provided material comfort. It's the people who never took pieces of my soul to make their lives more convenient. The people who, even with no obligation to love me, chose to do so because they saw me. Truly saw me. I live alone now. But I no longer feel lost. No one controls me, no one makes me feel like I have to be good enough to be loved. And most importantly, no one can take away what belongs to me anymore. Not my money, not my opportunities, not my dignity. I didn't win. I didn't need to. I just needed to live a life that didn't come at the cost of my silence. And if that counts as being saved, then I was the one who saved myself. If you were ever taught to be grateful for being loved in the only way they knew how, even if that way hurt, you know this, love should never come with one-sided sacrifice. If someone ever called you strong, independent, or the pride of the family, and then used those very words as a reason to abandon you when you needed help the most, remember this: your anger is valid. And you are not wrong for feeling hurt. You are not ungrateful, not weak, not too sensitive. You are simply brushing up against the truth. I used to believe that silence was maturity, that forgiving quietly was noble, that if I bit my tongue and kept the peace, eventually someone would see that I deserved to be valued. But no. The truth is, sometimes, the only thing you get from silence is another round of being dismissed. The truth is, family is not a place where betrayal should come without accountability, where they demand you call it love. You can forgive if you choose to, but you also have the right to walk away. You can try to mend things, but you also have the right to draw boundaries. And sometimes, walking away isn't because you've stopped loving, it's because you love yourself enough not to let anyone keep hurting you under the disguise of doing what's best for you. Daring to be angry. Daring to speak. Daring to do what's right even if the whole family stands against you. That's a kind of growth no one teaches you, but you learn it anyway, through blood and tears. If you've made it this far, maybe you've felt like the burden bearer, the replacement, the good child, in a family that never really heard you. Maybe you've sat quietly at dinner, swallowing tears while others were praised and you were told, "You're fine, you can handle yourself." Maybe you've asked yourself if you were asking for too much just for wanting to be loved without needing to earn it. I want to tell you, you're not wrong. Your feelings are not wrong. Anger doesn't make you a bad person. It means you're finally starting to understand your worth. If this story touches something in you, leave a comment. Share a small part of your own journey. Or simply write, "I deserve better." Share it with someone who needs a hug in the form of words, someone standing at the edge between enduring and saving themselves. Who knows, maybe just one story is all it takes for someone to take a step toward their own freedom. And if you want to walk alongside stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Because here, we don't tell stories to mourn. We tell them to remind each other. Survival is a victory. And you deserve to be seen, no conditions attached.